What I'd like to do is ask you to unmute yourself so I can hear some giggles, please.
Nice heart.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. It's my giggle hat. So laughter yoga is a thing. It's basically, we don't laugh enough as adults. Children laugh sort of 200 to 300 times a day, whereas adults, we probably laugh, if we're lucky, 5 to 10 times a day. So today I'm just going to run through some really basic laughter exercises and some breathing exercises to help release some tension, some stress, some anxiety, get the endorphins flowing in the brain, and connecting us at a deeper level. So I'm just, rather than just go through all the benefits and everything, we're just going to go with this. And so what I want everyone to do, first of all, I want you just to put your hands together on your chest like this. I'm just going to take a deep breath up and breathe out. We'll do another one. Deep breath up. And perfect. Right. So we're a little bit more relaxed now. We've got 4 laughs as humans. So the first laugh that we've got is a social laugh, where we don't really want to laugh. We feel like we're going to laugh anyway. And that comes from our neck. And that goes a bit like this, goes a bit. I want to hear you. Perfect. So now we're going to very good, very good. Yay! So very good, very good. Yay! So this is a power pose. When we've got our arms like this, we cannot feel sad. You can't go, I feel really sad at the moment. It makes you feel empowered, happy. The other good thing about the very good, yay, it's a break between each laughter exercise. Now I've only got about 6 or 7 minutes, so I'm going to run through a couple that we can do. Hopefully you can take away with you as exercises. So the second laugh that we've all got, and this one comes from the heart, and this is what gets the blood pumping around the body and starts firing up these endorphins, and that's more of a Take a deep breath in and hold, and okay, our third laugh, and this one's really important, and this comes from our stomach, and what we're doing is we're expelling all the oxygen out of our lungs and getting fresh stuff in, but we're also massaging all these internal organs that don't get much of a massage on a day-to-day basis. And this is your best Santa laugh, and it's a belly laugh, and it's a very good, very good. Yay! Very good. Yay! Lovely. Right, fourth and final laugh, and this one is the one that's going to open our minds up slightly. And this is a laugh, and we've all got one up here. We're going to open our minds, and we're just going to go. Good, very good, very good. Yay! Perfect. So everyone should be feeling a little bit more lightheaded, and that's your endorphins firing up. The dopamine is sort of starting to go into the brain as well. I'm starting to feel a bit more alive and alert. So I'm going to teach you a couple of different laughing exercises that you can do on a daily basis if you feel that you need to. So during this current climate, I've laughed daily for the last 4 months, and it helps me basically. So these are some laughing techniques. The first one is when we have a shower in the morning, we can put on our giggle cream. So I want you to get your giggle cream like this, and we're going to go we're going to rub all the giggles. The problem is we need to drop the giggle. So get your towel, show us your towel, and we're going to go. Good, very good. Yay! Fantastic. Right, we'll take another deep breath in and hold it. And okay, and this next out breath, I want us to let out a long ha. Okay, so take a deep breath in, hold, and ha.
Oh.
Perfect. Okay, so now this next one, we're going to let out a ha, 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 ha. Okay, for as long as we can. And then we take another breath in. Okay, so take a deep breath in, hold, and another breath in, and perfect. I can hear some genuine chuckles, which is fantastic. So I'm going to do two more exercises. And the first one is, it's called cry laughter, because crying and laughter are very similar emotions, similar feelings. So I want you to be your best toddler. So imagine you're a toddler having a tantrum, and we're going to go, and then if the laugh comes, let the laugh come naturally. Okay, so we're going to get our clench our fists, and we're going to go. Very good, very good. Yay! Fantastic. Okay, one more, last one, and then I'll let you get on with it. Okay, so this one I've been doing every single day, and it's a bit of a long exercise, and it's called a worry juice. And we've got worries. So they can be little tiny worries, they can be sort of medium-sized worries, or they can be massive worries, but ultimately everyone's got them. But I like to make a worry juice out of them. So if you just quickly watch what I do. So we take our little hee-hees, our little worries, hee-hee-hee-hee-hee-hee, and then we get our ha-ha-ha-ha-ha-ha-ha. Then we get the big worries. We put them in our ear. Then we do the same on the other hand. So we do the hee-hee-hee-hees, and then the ha-ha-ha-ha-ha, and then the put them in our ear. Then we're going to get a glass, breath in, and then we go. Each one, we do the same. We shake our worries, and then we get rid of them. All right? Okay. So let's get all those little worries, those little niggly ones, those little. And the big one. Put them in the air. And then get a little one. Okay, get your glass ready. Take a deep breath in. And and there's 4 pounds, deep breath in. And you got it. And then we shake. And throw your worries away.
Yay!
Very good. Very good.
Very good.
Yay. Lovely. So we'll just take one. We're going to take 3 deep breaths just to ground you, because the thing is, when you laugh a lot, obviously everything goes a bit high and a bit spacey, and I want to just get you back down ready for the next session. So take a deep breath in, hold, And another deep breath in. And last one. And thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Pete. That was amazing.
No worries.
That was a lot of fun.
How's everyone feeling? Everyone feeling a bit more grounded?
Thank you, Pete. And I can't stop smiling.
Great. And that's great because Paul is coming on now. Over to you, Paul. You need to unmute yourself, Paul.
Can I just take this up?
Hi, Paul. You need to unmute yourself.
It's unmuted now.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Okay. Let me share the screen if I can. And we will go to.
Hopefully, it won't be so temperamental now.
I've lost my picture, but I'm assuming you can all see me and hear me.
We can see you.
Excellent. I don't quite know how to follow that. I don't think there'll be much laughter in the next 20 minutes, but hopefully we can learn a little bit. So I have lost all the images, so I'm looking at a slide of my own slide rather than anybody's faces. So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you to Valentina and Stephen for inviting me back yet again. Today I've been asked to talk about diversity, inclusion and resilience. Last time it was just resilience, so I apologise in advance for anybody who attended one of the other events. There are a couple of the slides that are duplicated, but there is some new stuff as well. And just to start off, I was talking to a colleague this morning when I was telling him about the diversity inclusion, and he said, oh, somebody told me a story once that diversity is being asked to go to a party, but inclusion is being asked to dance, which I thought was quite a good analogy, really, because you know the easy bit is just asking somebody along to a party on an evening, but to actually get them up and dancing is a lot harder process to do. So diversity inclusion. For those of you who have seen it before, I'll start with definitions, and then I will move on to what I do most of my day is using psychometric assessments. So hope you enjoy. I think there is going to be a Q&A session at the end. So if there are any questions, just please hang on and we can talk about them at the end. So what is diversity? Simply put, it's about difference. And thankfully for me and the job that I do, we're all different, not just in terms of gender, race, height, etc., but behavior, personality, mental ability, fluid intelligence, emotionality. Every single person that I've ever met is unique, which is brilliant. So makes my job so much easier. If we were all clones, it would get a little bit difficult, but everybody is unique. We all have our special things as long as we take the time to find them. So a couple of things just to think about in terms of a commercial world, and I do deal in reality with businesses and the commercial environment. First things first, in the UK, for every 10% increase in gender diversity within the exec team, the EBITDA rose by 3.5%. But despite that, there's still only an average of 12% females in these teams, which I find very, very strange. Next one, 51% of employees believe diversity helps introduce staff with unique skills into their workforce. 77% of CEOs claim that their diversity.
Paul, you're muted. Paul, you're muted. Paul,
Is that better?
about that, yes.
I don't know why it's...
I think Zoom is being temperamental today. So the internet. It's a bit too hot, maybe.
Okay, are you back again now? I've
Yeah,
got you back again with
okay.
pictures. That's better. Where did I get to? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, can you remember which one I got to? It's that one. Yeah?
Yeah.
85% of senior execs globally agreed that diversity is so important as different perspectives drive innovation. And the final one, 54% of employees say that diversity is crucial to businesses to ensure that they have they behave and work ethically. It's easy for somebody to say. So just a few key facts there to really start to get people thinking in terms of what does diversity inclusion mean in the workplace. With regard to resilience, resilience is about being able to bounce back. It's about being able to build a sustainability within the individual that can actually bounce back from things like a global pandemic, things like 12 weeks being locked in your own house, and being able to bounce back. But it just doesn't happen overnight. There has to be some form of process to help people develop their resilience. And the model that's on the screen now is just something I use to try and help people put it into different compartments in terms of how they might work that. And for me, it's fundamentally important that people should understand themselves, so they need a level of self-awareness. They need to know what their motivators are, their fears are, and their strengths and potential limitations, and to know where training and coaching might help them improve their resilience. So are we still with me? Excellent, thank you. Okay, so this is something that I developed with Performance Matrix, something I developed with an occupational psychologist about 15 years ago. It was initially intended to help sell assessments, but the reality is it's really important in getting people to understand that, and I know Stephen gets very disappointed when I say this, but there is no such thing as a perfect human being. We're a combination of things, but we're not perfect. But what I try and do is work with the individual to look at their, if we start down in the bottom left-hand corner, look at their behaviours, look at their levels of emotional intelligence, look at how well they build their relationships with others, and look at their overall behaviours and personality to see how we can get them to behave and act with others the best possible way we can. Really, really difficult to do, very easy to say, but through self-awareness training, it certainly can help. At the top of the chart there, at the top of the pyramid, is cognitive ability. I guess most people on the screen today will have heard of IQ. IQ is a measure of crystallized intelligence. IQ is basically how much somebody knows. But in the workplace, we measure something called GTQ, or fluid intelligence, which is really looking at how quickly people learn and pick up new skills, which if in this current environment where there's so much change, so much rapid change, and people are having to really rethink the way that they do their jobs, then cognitive ability becomes really, really important. And the final part of the triangle, the final corner of the triangle, is around skills and competencies. So the first 2 points are around soft skills. This is around hard skills. And my sort of philosophy when I'm working with somebody is if we get the right behaviours and social, emotional intelligence that's required for a specific role. I was with a client yesterday, and we really started looking at, they needed a certain level or a certain style of behaviour that didn't quite fit with good communication in the organisation. So we had to work a little bit around, okay, so what do we do to help people communicate when it's not their natural skill set? And we started to look at ways of developing that. So if we get the right behaviours and attitudes, with the right level of fluid intelligence. So not everybody is a Ferrari and not everybody is a Morris Minor. The majority of us learn at a certain pace. So I think earlier on there was a couple of trainers involved out there. Trainers, when they're working in a room, will try and measure their pace to the room, sometimes quicker, sometimes slower. And then what you'll try and do is have a catch-up session at the end of the day, so people always go away with the full training package in place, but they may have picked it up at slightly different speeds. So the people performance matrix is something that I find really, really useful in trying to get people to understand where they are. And ultimately, it's to try and get people into that middle space of their potential performance being as maximized as possible. So I'm going to show you a couple of the tools that I use now. The first is a model called disk theory. It's been around for at least 60, 70 years. It was developed by a guy called William Moulton Marston back in 1951. And Marston wrote a book about behaviors of normal people. Again, with the client yesterday, he was saying that he recruited abnormal people. He said, my team are just not normal. And I said, normal's a very, very broad spectrum. And, you know, a lot of people would say I'm not normal, but for me, I think I am. So it's all about just being able to understand where you are. So if we look at this model, you'll see the vertical axis. That is about the environment in which people work. Some people will perceive it as hostile, antagonistic, and unfriendly. Others, on the other hand, will see their working environment as friendly and favourable. And that's a continuum. Everybody on the call today, you can place yourself somewhere along that line in terms of how you perceive the working environment. Once you've done that, you then have a choice as to whether you act with a behaviour style that is active and you do something about that environment, or you take a far more passive style and allow the environment to just go on in the background. So people that perceive the environment as hostile and like to take an active style have what we call dominance. They're direct, they're competitive, they're forceful. They like to win, so they're motivated by power and authority and often fear failure. So in a lot of organizations with a predominance of dominance, you often find that creates a blame culture, because the easiest way of not failing is to blame somebody else. And that can be really, really toxic in an organization. So there are a lot of businesses with dominance in prevalence, and you have to be very aware that you know, a blame culture is not a good environment to try and culture well-being, for example. So high Ds perceive the environment as hostile and like to do something about it. Influencers see the world far more favourably, a lot more friendly. They like to influence, they like to motivate, persuade. These are the people. They like to talk. That means they don't listen too good unless they've had some training, but we'll come on to that later. But again, a very active style, motivational, persuasive, influential. Move on to the third quadrant, steadiness or pace. There's about 42% of the UK working population have steadiness in their profile. It's by far the most prevalent profile in the UK, and it's all about the pace at which somebody works. So they're methodical, they're logical, they're organised, they're thorough, they're reliable. They are natural born listeners. So one thing in terms of the UK, we do have a population that will listen. We do have a population that will stand in queues in the main. I'm not one of them, unfortunately, but there are 42% of the population that are happy to stand in a queue. Motivated by security, fear insecurity. So the last two profiles that I've looked at, influence and steadiness, in this last 12 weeks when we've been locked down, the isolation will be really, really difficult to cope with if you're somebody that likes people. The insecurity and the unknown of what's going to happen tomorrow. Are the regulations going to change? Are we going to get locked down again? Are really, really going to impose a lot of pressure on people with high steadiness because they don't know what's going to happen next. So those two profiles in particular had a really tough 10 weeks. because they're used to seeing the world as a favourable and nice place to be. And with COVID-19, it's been made that little bit more uncomfortable. Final quadrant is compliance. Put my teeth in. Compliance is all about policy and procedures. It's about seeing the world in a hostile way and using the rules or processes to deal with that hostility. So high Cs are very precise, very accurate, perfectionist even. And in a working environment, being a perfectionist can be quite a challenge, because in a commercial world, there is an element of how much does it cost to get it right, and how much does it cost to get it perfect, and they're not always the same cost, unfortunately. So that's DISC theory. Really, really useful. It's all about behaviours. It's all about workplace behaviour. It takes about 7 or 8 minutes to do the questionnaire, and is widely used throughout businesses generally. The second model I want to talk about is emotional intelligence. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but you've got about 5 minutes to go.
Yeah, that's okay. Okay. I've got, but okay. So emotional intelligence, you can see it on the screen. I won't take you through it. Developed by a chap called Adrian Furnham and a chap called Dr. Kevin Petrides. And emotional intelligence is really looking at the whole person, not just the workplace behaviours. There's 4 factors: well-being, sociability, emotionality, and self-control. They are 4 really important factors within this model. There are individual facets underneath, and there are 2 important independent facets down at the bottom of the slide: self-motivation and adaptability, which, when we come on to looking at resilience, come into their own really a little bit. So we showed you that model at the beginning. Optimism is one of the key strengths and key things in terms of improving and building resilience. So from DISC you get influence, which is all about being optimistic, seeing the glass half full rather than half empty. From the independent facets around TQ, you get things, oh, bear with me 1 second, my screen's about to die. We're not having a very good techie day today, are we? There we go. Well-being includes optimism, includes happiness, and it includes self-esteem. That's on the emotional intelligence side, and they are all really, really important in terms of keeping that positive mental attitude. Next one is making the possible, but making the impossible possible. These tend to be natural leaders. So D profiles will have what we call a can-do attitude or a Nike attitude. The Nike tick is just do it and see what happens. What is the to lose? So they're very low in terms of risk awareness, but they're very high on sometimes making a lot of mistakes. And again, the client I was with yesterday actually encouraged people to make mistakes as long as they learned from them and then modified their time next time around to improve what they did. The final one in this series is around emotional awareness and communication. In nearly every diagnostic, team diagnostic, management team I've ever worked with, communication invariably comes up as one of the top 3 issues. And it's all about understanding. It's all about clarity of message. And again, we go back to the S's. S's are really, really good listeners, but unless the message is clear, it gets diluted, it gets confused, and it really gets quite complicated to understand where we are. In terms of emotionality, empathy, things like empathy, things about emotional expression, being able to express yourself and being able to put tonality into a conversation really helps people to understand whether you're trying to be angry or whether you're not trying to be angry. It helps. So it's the tonality and the tone and the style of delivery, as well as just, does it mean what the words are actually saying. So if we pull all this together, mentioned several times already, my view is that you need to understand yourself. It's really important that people have self-awareness. We're all unique, we're all diverse, and we're all very special in our own way. And rather than drawing conclusions about people, my recommendation would be to take your time to get to know them. The more different they are to yourself, the more you can actually learn from them. So that's really useful in terms of my way of working, is to, if people say to me, well, you know, you're a little bit strange, you're a little bit odd, I know I can do a good job in terms of changing their mindset. And the final one, workplace diversity, it's more of a moral issue. Organisations can harness the differences in people to help them become far more successful, far more innovative, and be better capable and better aware in terms of dealing with their clients' needs and making themselves more profitable in the short term. So, final slide, Valentina, you're all right? Within 5 seconds, I think. So I've got 5 seconds quickly to go through this. But in conclusion, it's not a quick fix. Practice, practice, practice. Human beings are extremely complex people. We do need to have certain levels of self-awareness, and we do need to understand our strengths. We need to know how we can improve through experience and what we should tackle. No more than 3. So, you know, the TQ model, 15 facets. Again, the company yesterday, I said, pick 2 or 3. Do not try and change all 15 facets in the next 3 months. It just won't happen. Pick 2 or 3, really successful, and then move on. And the final point, use a coach, use a mentor, use your best friend, practice different ways, look at different ways of doing things, and then really start to think about why people are different and how you can embrace that difference and actually work with them in a better way. Thank you very much. A very quick resume, but I think I'm within my 20 minutes.
Thank you so much, Paul. Much appreciated.
No problem at all.
And we would have questions after the presenters have all given.
That's fine.
Yes, please. But if you have any question you would like to ask now, please pop it in the chat. And we're going to go to Dr. Roxane now. Dr. Roxane, please take yourself off mute and let's have at it.
Yeah, could Paul stop sharing his screen?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. There we go. Can everyone see that?
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Lovely. Okay. Well, thank you for the invitation. I do appreciate it. And I'm going to be... Hello?
Sorry about running late and the tech issues.
No, that's okay. I'll try to whiz through it and not keep everyone back. Okay, so I'm going to be covering diversity and inclusion in the workplace. So this is an overview of the presentation, talk a bit about difference, do a bit of definitions, the need for it, the benefits, work challenges, linking discrimination and mental ill health, and then moving forward. So I think one of the reasons that this area interests me is that we seem to spend a lot of time accentuating the difference, you know, why we're different, rather than what makes us similar. So we've got all these acronyms that we use a lot of the time, you know, BAME, BNE, Hispanic, Latino, Latina. And Hispanic, Latino, Latina doesn't really mean anything except the fact that you speak Spanish. So it doesn't really say anything about your ethnicity, race, you know, nationality. It just means that you speak Spanish. You could be from Cuba, Mexico, you know, all the Latin countries, Colombia, and you've referred as Hispanic. That doesn't really mean anything about who you are and what you believe. Also, people of color, which is a term that I've always found very strange. What exactly does it mean? So people who are not of color, do they lack color? Are they no color? What exactly are we talking about as well? And there's another acronym as well, WEIRD: Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. Those who are those supposed to be entitled? So again, what's the message we're sending? Do we want to stay different, or we don't want to look to see how we can work together as well? I'm going to use quite a lot about James Baldwin in my speech today, because I think he was quite good in actually looking at what race meant, especially as an American. He was Black, he was a homosexual, he left America to live in Paris for quite some time. he struggled, growing up, before the civil rights movement, and he actually struggled to actually find a space in America. And he made the statement that the story of the Negro in America is the story of America's, and it is not a pretty story. You might say that carrying in context of, slavery, people being brought from Africa into the Americas, not just America, North America, South America, the Caribbean. And the fact that if you're talking about why Black people are in America and saying that, they're different, why they're different? Because America never really allowed them to be assimilated into the culture. They always seem different. So if the country that they're going to is not assimilating them, why should they become assimilated? Because it's hard for them to do that. So if we're talking about who you are, the people in Hawaii, which again is part of North America, part of the United States of America, it is one of the states. It's a lot more diverse than a lot of other states within America. So in Hawaii, because the native peoples in Hawaii were treated a lot differently than the native peoples in the mainland of North America. So, and nearly everyone is of mixed race ancestry. So people don't define themselves as one certain race or ethnicity. They tend to include everything about who they are and where they come from. So, they focus on themselves as French, Italian, Filipino, Native American. They could include, religion. So they refer to themselves as Jewish, can include color, white or Black. So again, they don't reference themselves as one particular aspect. Because, when you get doing a survey and you go to, getting demographics, I'm always wondering, why do you have, white, Black, and then you've got Black Caribbean, you've got Black African, like, what does that mean? It doesn't really mean anything. It's an easy way to actually put someone in a box. So we have to think about, why don't we focus on what else we can, be as well. In terms of diversity, basically that just means different. And within the United Kingdom, there are several protected characteristics. And if you discriminate against someone, that is illegal as well as against the law. So you should not be discriminating against people because of their age, disability, gender reassignment, whether they're single or not, or they're in a civil partnership, whether they're pregnant, what race they are, what religion they belong, what sex they are, and again, their sexual orientations. All of these shows that these are protected characteristics and you should not be discriminating because of any of these. We know it still happens, and that's what we need to focus on improving. In terms of inclusion, that means that people are included. They feel respected, they appreciate it, they want to contribute, they can contribute, and they are involved in the process. They're not just being told, well, we appreciate you, but then everything that's going on within the organization does not allow them to actually put a point forward or put a suggestion forward. And again, one of the ways that people maintain mental health within the organization is actually becoming involved. That's one of the areas that shows that if you are engaged, if you're allowed to contribute to the organization, it actually helps with your mental well-being. So it's important to get people included, not just saying, yes, everyone is included, because I know a lot of organizations say that everyone is included, but actually when you look at what they're doing, it does not show that people are included. Now we need to consider diversity and inclusion because the workforce is changing, as we know. The workforce is aging, that's not going to improve anytime soon. High levels of self-employment, increased migration across Europe, and just because Brexit has happened doesn't mean that people are not going to keep coming into the UK, and also people living in the UK are not going to stop leaving the UK. That is always going to happen. Brexit is not going to put any sort of barriers against that happening. So there's always going to be difference, and it is going to increase because UK has an aging economy. They need to get workers in. We have an issue with medical staff and nursing staff. We're not training enough individuals, so we have to keep bringing those people into the country. So you're always going to have difference. People are outsourcing, so a lot of now small and medium-sized enterprises as well have a lot of new and continuing turnover for employees. So the workforce is changing, and that's not going to stop. And we have to support difference in the workplace because everyone should be given the potential to fulfill their potential at work. because it's not about giving someone a job and then leaving them to get on with it. They need the support, you know, they need the understanding, they need their competencies to be developed. And if if you invest in people, then you do get the benefits of that, because they will actually, make sure that they do what they can to make sure your organization is a success. Because as we saw during the pandemic, people did pull out the stops to respond to the different changes that were happening within the country. The nurses came to you, doctors, people within organizations, were told to work from home, and they immediately responded to it. So that shows that they do want to make a difference, they do want to contribute. And once you have a diverse workforce, it can entail quite a lot of benefits to you. It can increase innovation, creativity. It allows you to respond better to international requests. It ensures flexibility. You respond quicker to changes, because everyone, as Paul said earlier, everyone is different. And difference is good, because you're not getting the same information when the same sort of response. And we need difference to move ahead. We need difference to think differently. Because if you have any situation, if you're just thinking the same way, you'll never get a solution for different situations. You need a difference. Again, it facilitates globalization once you have a diverse workforce, because people have different relationships, ethnicity, so they would understand how something works in a different country. So if you're thinking of moving into that country, then you can call on these workers who've got this inside information. Okay, well, what exactly happens in that country that we can actually move forward with it. And and then the ROI as well. If ethnic competencies, expertise, and experience are fully utilized, this could actually add a further 24 billion of 1.3 GDP to the UK economy. So there's a financial aspect of embracing diversity as well. But there are challenges to this, as we know, because even though 3.9 million workers are from ethnic backgrounds, and we've got 32.17 million people employed, that might have decreased within the last 4 months. When you look at the figures, that ethnic workers are more than twice as likely to be on contracts, more than likely to be on zero-hour contracts, and more than likely to be in temporary work. And as we saw with COVID-19, there are a lot more people from from ethnic backgrounds who are actually succumbing to actually getting the disease and dying from it. So again, that's a disparity that we have to think about. And if you look at competencies and performance, again, we know that ethnic minorities are less likely to rate in the top 2 performance rating, because it's systematic. They actually, you don't evaluate them as you would any other group within the organization. The appraisal and reward system tend to ignore their skills, expertise, or potential, and they tend to overvalue the qualities that are more traditional rather than what a diverse person would bring to the workplace. So the organization is sort of structured to value one set of employees rather than those who are more diverse. But why do we need to focus on discrimination and looking at those protected characteristics? It is a stressor, and once you experience enough stresses, you get stressed. You suffer from work-related stress, and you suffer from anxiety, depression. You might then develop burnout, which means that you're leaving the organization, which means that you're stepping out of the economy. So these are things that are not very useful for sustaining organizations or for sustaining the overall economy. And again, if you look at more health effects, societal level, it can lead to, again, depression, anxiety, stress, and it affects not only your mental health, but also your physical health. It can affect, your attitude towards a job, whether or not you're displaying citizenship behavior and a perceived diversity climate. But what it does do, it allows those who are experiencing this sort of discrimination to actually develop better coping behavior. Again, that's a plus to buffer the effects for the individual, but that doesn't help actually moving people forward and accepting diversity within the workplace. Again, this is all research that shows, strong relationship between discrimination and poor mental health. So a lot of evidence to show that discrimination and curtailing what people can contribute is not helping individuals, because they will step out of the workplace. It's not helping the organization, because they'll be always trying to play catch up and trying to figure out, okay, how can I become a better organization? So again, no one benefits when discrimination happens. And then we've got all the subtle forms, all those microaggressions, the micro assaults, the micro insults, the micro invalidations, asking someone or telling someone, oh, you speak very good English, or telling someone they have an accent. And I usually say, well, so do you, because everyone has an accent. So not only persons who are different, persons who are ethnic have got accents. Every single person in the world has got an accent. It doesn't matter. That's what you are. So again, all these micro insults, they can be demeaning, and again, they will affect the mental health of workers. And a lot of organizations tend to use unconscious bias as one of the ways to actually address, diversity, inclusion, and equality within the organization. But it is a tick box exercise because it doesn't really provide an understanding for the person who is doing this. The person will do the 1 hour training and then say, yeah, I've done it. I know what to look out for, and then they would fall back into the same routine because the bias is structured. It is part of the system. So even though you get a 1 hour unconscious bias training course, it doesn't really address all the issues that are actually causing the situation to arise and causing people to treat people who are differently, basically. So what next? And these are, again, we're going back to James Baldwin and W.E. Du Bois as well, Black men who were quite vocal about what it meant to be Black, what it meant to, be different, how it affects not only themselves, but people who are different, people of color, people who are of different ethnicities. And as Du Bois said, the problem of the 20th century, and I suppose this then translates into the 21st century, is a problem with the color line, the relation of the darker to the lighter races of men in Asia and Africa, in Americas and the islands of the sea. Then Baldwin said, racism exacts a toll on those who are racist, distorting their humanity and hindering their ability to be fully self-reflective beings. And he said, history is of the past, history is the present. We carry our history with us. To think otherwise is cruel, because what is happening today is what you're dealing with at the present time. Because everything keeps happening, because as we've seen with the Black Lives Matter movement, they are raising issues that have been happening for the last 40, 50 years. Young Black men of color especially have been killed systematically by the police, and that's nothing new. It's not history, it's what's happening at the present time. And again, Baldwin said again, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed unless it is faced. And you have to decide who you are and force the world to do with you, not with its idea of you. And again, I know individuals, I've got a friend as well, who changed their names because, having an ethnic sounding names, again, comes with its own discriminatory practices because people begin to have an idea of who you are. You call them and you say your names, then they've got a picture of this is what this business is about. And I always believe, to accept the challenges because I suppose I don't have an ethnic sounding name, but it is different, but I refuse to be less than who I am. And you have to stand up and say, yes, this is who I am. This reflects me. This is my name. It is part of who I am, so I'm not changing it. And again, we know that these things have been done for quite some time, creating the guidelines, consider the language, be inclusive. And it's fine to propose these things, but organizations now need to start acting on them and make sure that, they are included, they are part of the culture and the climate of the organization. It's fine to say, keep doing these things, but we know that organizations keep doing these things and keep putting policies and practices in place, but they don't really follow through with them. So when something happens, they tend to brush it under the carpet, or they focus on that individual. That individual is a person who is causing the problems. It's nothing to do with the structure, it's nothing to do with the systemic structure of the organization of the society. They blame the individual so that individual is problematic, so it's fine. We've got all these policies in place and they're working, but actually they're not. So it's fine to keep creating these guidelines and policies, but we need to make sure that they are implemented. And because of Black Lives Matter, again, you've got all these high profile organizations, saying, yes, we're against racism, we are anti-racist, we are making the difference, and we are aware of it and we're changing. And I can predict today that in 5 years' time, if you look at who are on their boards, it will still be white, middle-aged men. If you look at what's happening in their companies, again, you'd still see the people who are different, still struggling to find a place, still struggling to get promoted, still struggling to make a foothold. Because it's fine to say it now because they're afraid of the economic backlash of, and people are saying, well, that company didn't go out and say, yes, we are against this. They did say we are with it, but again, saying it is fine, but then you have to act on it. You actually have to act on it and say, yes, I am making a difference. I will be making the change. And that is me, and I am within time, I believe. There we go. So we are waiting for questions after.
Yes. Thank you so much, Dr. Roxanne. That was amazing. Thank you for shedding so much light on that. And we're to have a musical break now, but I'm quite conscious about the time. And so we're going to have to do the musical break shortly after. But Dr. Viv, you have the floor. Let us bombard ourselves with knowledge and information.
Well, I don't have a PowerPoint presentation, so you're going to have to just put up with me, listen to what I've got to say. Okay, diversity is what we're talking about today, and I suppose what I want to do is a little bit of storytelling. So I was born at the foothills of the Pennines. Do you know where that is? Well, I'm not going to hear your answers, but it's in Lancashire, and it's not too far away from the comedian Peter Kay. I was the last born child, the baby. I was described by my mum as very sensitive and somewhat confused by the world around me. I developed feelings of disconnection from my family and assumed that this was associated with the fact that my mum was deaf. So growing up in a family where your mum is deaf, you find that you'll call out her name, mum, 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 and you don't get a response. You start to feel that disconnection from her. So I began to wonder if I was adopted, if I was just not connected to this family. And also, strangely, my mum never announced her deafness. She never said, oh, by the way, I'm deaf. This was something we had to learn through. She used to hide her deafness. She would hide it from everyone. And as I grew as an infant, as a child, I worked it out for myself. So I was this little sensitive person who grew to be unheard at home. So what did I become? I became a very tricky teenager, that mouthy kid in everyone's classroom that challenged everything that came out of every teacher's mouth. I never stopped challenging. I never stopped challenging maths teachers. And if there are any maths teachers with us today, and you can tell me why the hell we did simultaneous equations, I'm really happy to hear that answer. Nobody has provided a good enough answer for me about this yet. So if there is anyone, please provide. So along with the questioning around maths and struggling relationally, because in talking to people and making relationships, I believed what people were saying. I took literally what they were saying. I was kind of stubborn. I was determined, and I was bloody minded. I don't think I've changed that much, if I'm really honest, on that front. But yes, those are some of my characteristics and character traits. You know, everybody's got that one friend, right? That one friend that wherever you go, that sort of gobby, mouthy one friend that has to say something. I was the kid in the classroom that said, sir, sir, or miss, miss, and also the woman and the student and the work colleague that would always stand up and say, why is this happening? Why is this like this? I need to understand more about that. So, you know, I was hyper-focused, bloody minded and determined, right? So, yeah, you've guessed that. That's already me. I've already told you that. So, oh, hang on a sec. I'm just checking my notes. Okay, so like I said before, I'm not going to make massive changes, and I didn't want to do that. And there is some value in this relentlessness and this pursuit of equity. And I've chosen the word equity as opposed to equality. And when I think about equity, I think about integrity, I think about fairness, and I think about honesty. I think about reasonableness. I didn't say equality because I'm not talking about sameness or uniformity or parallelism. I'm not talking about that. What I need and what you need in the workplace may be very different. What I need as a disabled person in the workplace may be very different to another disabled person. I don't want to be the same. I want to have an equitable service or need met in a workplace, and I don't want to be put in a box. So for example, I've just taken on a new role and I start soon, and one of my requirements, although you may look at me and think, oh, she's mobile, she's not a wheelchair user, is to have a car parking place. Now, without going into the details around my disability, you might think, why does she need a car parking space? I need a car parking space. Well, you know, I'm not just going to discuss my disability with everybody in the office, but, you know, the managers there understand that that is a requirement for me. So what do I want and want others to want? Well, as a disabled person, I want to live in a world where we don't have such low expectations of disabled people. I want to see an end to the unhelpful and patronising language. Things like deaf and dumb, things like hearing impaired, things like handicapped, things like visually impaired. I am not here to prescribe how people choose to define their own disability, but what I am here to do is point out that the words and phrases that I've used are based around deficit modelling. Something is missing. So hearing impaired, you're impaired. Visually impaired, you're impaired. Handicapped, you're impaired. It's all around having a deficit, a loss, a lack of something. If you speak to members of the deaf community members will tell you they're proud to be deaf. We don't use language like hearing impaired. We don't use language like deafened. Deaf people choose to use the phrase deaf because they are proud members of a deaf community and deaf culture. So I subscribe to the social model of disability, where I believe we are more disabled by society than by our minds or our bodies. I despise inspiration porn. Yes, and I've said the word porn in your podcast, in your webinar, Valentina. I have said it because I can't stand these posters that say, oh, you know, the only disability is not trying hard enough. Oh, you know, with some guy with one arm swimming the channel, or some visually impaired person climbing a mountain. This is not what this is about. We live in, this is 2020. We are not here to objectify disabled people. We're not here to say, oh, isn't that an inspiration? And we're not here to say, thank God that's not me, aren't I lucky? Because that's not very helpful either. It doesn't lift people. It's not an equitable platform for us to work from. So I don't want to be held up as an example where people think, thank God my life isn't as bad as theirs. Of course, I want to learn from other disabled people. I would really like my friend who's autistic to tell me how to hack my own computer because I cannot remember my password. She is a genius around computers and something that I don't think she'll ever be able to teach me. Yeah, I want to learn. I want to learn those sorts of things, but I don't want to be held up as some kind of inspiration. I think Roxana mentioned before about the awareness of microaggressions and those everyday slights and insults and negative non-verbal and verbal expressions, whether they are intentional or not. For me, those messages are so powerful and so destructive. To look at someone and say, oh, well, you don't look very disabled, is not helpful. It doesn't make people feel good. They've made a stand, they've taken a position and said, I have a disability. They don't want you to ask, what is it? They don't want you to, if I want to tell you what my disability is, I'll tell you. If I don't, I won't. I've made my position clear. And this is the chosen language that I have chosen to express myself. So what I like to do is take the lead from other people and talk about things in the way that they do. So for example, if a deaf person says I'm deaf, I use deaf back to them. I don't, as a non-deaf person, suddenly just decide that it's better for me to say hearing impaired, because it's not going to be better for them to receive that. It's just not. So, you know, use the language of the person that's using the language, follow their lead. So I want to promote allyship, and I want to promote that through listening, through learning, through paying attention, through observation, through not interrupting. Feel free to interrupt me, Valentina, if I'm going over time. Through remembering that not one size fits all. We are not the same. We will never be the same. So I'm going to give you, I don't know how we are. How are we for time? How long do I have left? Your microphone's off. It's off. I can't hear you.
Apologies, you're good. You've got about 8 minutes left.
Perfect. So I'm going to give you 2 examples. So I'm going to talk about 2 things that I'm really passionate about. So that obviously for me, disability is a broad range, but specifically having been raised by a deaf mum and a deaf mum that never used sign language, I am passionate about the deaf community. So I'm going to give you some information about the deaf community that I hope you will take away and that you will really benefit from. So deaf community. So there are a sort of spectrum of deafness, if you like. So there's the big D deaf community, and the sign for that would be this. And that is a political statement about the deaf community who are proud to be deaf, who use British Sign Language as their first language, and who are active members of the community and culture. And then there's something called small d deaf, and those people are describing themselves as deaf people who've had a hearing loss later in life. So those are the 2 big differences, who may not involve themselves in the deaf community through sign language, through deaf culture, through the deaf community events, etc. So there's a kind of divide there. Most of the elderly population that don't use sign language fit into that category, the small d deaf. So these are the 2 groups. So obviously there is no point in assuming that all deaf people use sign language, because they don't. Many people do, and those that do would like you to make an effort. So even if you don't sign, what I would advise you to do is not take out a pen and paper, is not look panicky, is just simply gesture. Just use your body in the way that the deaf people are using their bodies. You don't need to use, if you start using a pen and paper, you'll find that deaf people's first language, deaf people in this group, their first language is not English. So you're not going to be able to actively communicate successfully using a pen and paper. So we need to think about that. So just a little bit of a backdrop to that. And the second thing I briefly want to talk about is when in my work, so maybe I work as a psychotherapist, and I work with some very complex mental health problems. And some of the mental health problems that I work with, people often make statements. So people will say things like, "Oh, I'm really OCD," or "Yeah, I'm such a stress head, and I've got this problem. I've got depression. I've got." Let me tell you, if any of you have experienced any of these things, you will know what these things are like. Please don't use mental health language. Really, please use it very carefully. Please be considered in your approach, because the people that have these problems and that really have a real difficulty in overcoming some of these issues don't like it when you make comments like, "Yeah, well, I've got OCD. Oh, well, you don't look autistic. Oh, you don't look like that." Just be really careful. Just listen to them and don't try and make your voice greater than theirs. And again, I think Roxanne talked about women and pregnancy and mothers. I think there was a slide, something about that. And it reminds me a little bit about going up to a pregnant woman and who says, "Oh, I've had a miscarriage." And the things that people say in that situation, which should never be uttered, are things like, "Oh, well, never mind, it was God's will." "Oh, well, how far gone were you?" "Oh, well, you weren't really pregnant, were you?" There's something about diminishing the voice of the individual and making your voice louder. We don't need to do that. We don't want you to do that. And I certainly don't want you to do that. I've got a little quote that I want to read, and it is a very small one. Disability in and of itself does not make you exceptional or me exceptional, but questioning what you think you know about disability and diversity does make you exceptional. So for all of you out there that are working in the field, please question your knowledge and insight as I question mine. And Valentina mentioned to me about diversity and asked me to come on here, and I chose specifically to talk about disability. But I'm married to a man who's from Africa. I have who is multiracial or mixed race, depending on how he wants to describe himself. I have a daughter who's mixed race, who is white passing, which is a very interesting phrase that I've now come across in young people. So I speak about what I speak about from the heart and from some personal experiences. So I hope you've all benefited from the stuff that I've waffled on about today. It's really nice to see you. So thank you.
Thank you so much, V. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That was amazing. And you do have a question, but I'm going to save it for question time.
Oh.
How's everyone feeling? Let me see a thumbs up if you're okay. Do you want a musical break? Do you want to go on? Shall we bombard us some more? How are we going?
Yeah,
musical break.
Have you been bombarded?
Yes, let me on.
Okay, give me a quick minute, please. Less than a minute. I will share my screen. Our artist couldn't join us today because he had to be on radio today for a live interview. So this is Femi Leye, and he is a Nigerian Afro jazz artist. He was with us at our last edition, and he is simply amazing. So please just grab a drink. Have you got your sachet of ViDrate?
Oh,
I've been drinking it. Well done. How are you feeling with it? Tell me after. I've been filling up with it. Let's go. Hello.
Hello.
I am lost. Hello. Thank you for enjoying that, assuming you did. Sorry, thumbs up if you enjoyed that. I like some sort of interaction. Yeah, great. Great, great, great. Thank you for indulging me. Right now, we're going to go to Lade Olugbemi, and she's a mental health first aider, and she's going to give us some tips on mental health and diversity and racism. You just listen to her. She's amazing. Over to you, Lade. Hello? Hello? Hi, Lade. Hi, Lade. Does anyone do TikTok here? There was a video they showed one time. There was this video they showed one time about conferences and board meetings done over Zoom. And suddenly a person disappears and then he reappears. And then they moved it back to the context of actually being back at work. And so while everyone is seated, we just suddenly get these superhuman powers to disappear and reappear suddenly and just go, ah, 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 then someone else talks about us and we're like, oh, sorry, you go. No, you go first. It's hilarious. And that's how this feels because it's either Lade's frozen or she stepped out or she just can't hear us, which then means I can then take center stage for now. So I'm going to share my screen with you and I will be talking to you about happiness at work and what happiness really, really means to us. Well, happiness is it's a bit of a complex word because people hear happiness and they automatically think that what that means is pleasure, good times, but they couldn't be further from the truth than that. Happiness is way more than that. It encompasses a lot of things. And as this goes on today, I will share what happiness means, how racism, how a lack of diversity affects our happiness. And I'll be sharing a personal story that happened to us back in 2018. So some of you might have heard or you have seen a video I shared. But first off, it all started in 2017 when my husband had a heart attack, Stephen, and this necessitated our move from Nigeria to the UK. Now, when we were moving, we did ask if we could get a spousal visa, but that couldn't be done because Stephen hadn't been resident in the UK in over 20 years. And for this reason, we couldn't get a spousal visa. However, they said I could come on my visit visa, which would allow me stay for a full year, and then I can apply for leave to remain based on family grounds. Now, this seemed great, so we took this option and moved. A year later, but during this year of staying in the UK, we were in limbo, especially me, because I had this fear at the back of my mind of what was going to happen. I'd heard so many horror stories about people applying for leave to remain and not getting it and being kicked out, immigration officers busting into your homes and just taking people away. So when it was time to apply, we paid a hefty sum of money to lawyers to apply on our behalf. We had made sure we weren't drawing anything from the public resource. But lo and behold, about 4 months later, we were told that our application was rejected. This was a shock because we met up with the income requirements. We had legitimate reason for me to be here, which they also said in their letter of rejection, saying, we acknowledge that you have a legitimate relationship and you've got a child, but you've only got two options. One, go back to Nigeria without your husband or 1 year old, or you all can go back to Nigeria. And Stephen couldn't do that because he had to be here for medical reasons. And I can't imagine, I don't think anyone here can imagine relocating without your 1 year old child. So this was horrible. And within this time frame, I had also had a miscarriage with all the worries that was going on. But I couldn't dwell on that because our main aim and focus then was just keeping our family together. So we got a new lawyer, and this lawyer advised us to start an online petition, which Stephen did. And this online petition raised more than 92,000 supporters, as you can see here on my screen. Don't break up my family. So we had that, and we had Stephen's mom, God rest her soul, who was there and dependent on us for her emotional well-being. And in fact, on the night of my miscarriage, I was in the hospital with Alexander, our first, who had a very nasty viral bug. So you can see us there. And a miscarriage it's a very painful physical thing to go through. Anyway, the point of my sharing this story is that early this month, I suddenly realized that I was depressed. I didn't want to get up. I didn't want to eat. I felt like I was walking through mud. I really felt weighted. And every morning when I woke up, I just said to Stephen, I just feel heavy. And it took us a while to figure out what the problem was. And that was the fact that everything that happened 2 years ago was just coming back and coming home to roost. I was suffering from PTSD. And I had managed to escape this last year, or maybe I went through it, but I didn't notice it. And I thought it was just postnatal depression. But I was quite consumed with having a newborn baby last year. So I didn't connect the two, but this year I did. And what I noticed was I started to practice a lot of presenteeism. I was making videos, I was sending out chats, tweets, LinkedIn, trying to get people. But I realized that I was dropping the ball. I wasn't actually checking things to see what I was doing. I was just doing it just to keep a presence. And my point and my reason for sharing this story is that this is what bias, this is what discrimination, this is what racism, this is what structural racism does to us. To anybody who is discriminated against, this is how you react. You start to doubt yourself. You suddenly develop critics, inner critics that just weren't there before. So I'm going to quickly talk about diversity, equality, and inclusion at work. Now, diversity, equality, and inclusion at work is understanding each other and moving beyond simple tolerance or tokenism, embracing and celebrating the rich differences contained within each individual. Let's not mince words here. We're all different. No two people are exactly the same. However, when it comes to race, when it comes to disability, what we find most of the time is mere tokenism, where we're not included, we are brought in. Like Paul said, we're asked to the dance, but we're not actually, we're invited to the dance, but we're not asked to dance. So we end up being the wallflower going, hey, look at me, me. And goodness, when you keep doing that, it hurts. I've got to say, it hurts. It really hurts, because every night you go to sleep, you say to yourself, have I done enough? Now, while diversity is about differences, acknowledging that we're all different, equality is acceptance, and inclusion is getting those differences to work together effectively, like the ingredients in a meal, a cocktail, or a garden. Now, I've said this because when you're cooking, every ingredient is vital to that meal you're making. And if you lose one, the meal turns out a bit so-so. Same as cocktails, you're making gin and tonic. You've got your gin, but you haven't got the tonic. Or you haven't got the lime or lemon. What are you doing? Or the mint leaves, it's just a bit diluted. You can create a sense of inclusion as an individual, as a team leader, by making our colleagues or our associates feel accepted and valued for the differences they have, rather than uncomfortably being conscious of them. And that's where you have things like, oh, this is my Black friend. Oh, meet Valentina, she's Black. She's from Nigeria. How about, oh, hi, meet Valentina. She's my friend. She lives in. Yeah, what about that? Or, oh, meet Vivian. Oh, yeah, you know, she represents deaf people. Just accept us as we are. So back to happiness. What is happiness? I already said it goes beyond the fleeting experience moments of pleasure and positivity. And if you look at this graphic I have on my screen, you will see a meal being prepared. And it's got all the spices. On the left side, you still have a different meal. And then we have here ingredients. And on ingredients for making happiness, you need basic needs, you need autonomy, you need mastery, and you need belonging. Now, you can't be happy if you don't have a home. In my story that I shared, I couldn't be happy because I wasn't sure where my home was going to be. We had sold everything off in Nigeria. Was I still going to have a family? And a family means my husband and my child. Was I still going to have that? I didn't have that. So for over a year here in the UK, I wasn't happy. Autonomy. How many of us have felt that anger being micromanaged? You're trying to do something. No, you should do it this way. No, it has to be this way. Can you come here and put it all? You just don't have any autonomy. And we all just like to have some little autonomy, even if it is in just choosing what we wear. Then there's mastery. Mastery is when you have the equal amount of skill set required to complete a required assignment. So when you do not have that, you get a lot of tension within you because you know that you would flop. You just can't do it. It's like telling a person, a gardener, to suddenly do the job of a neurosurgeon. He can't do it because he hasn't got the mastery. We've all got our different masteries. And that's why the pursuit of self-development should never, ever stop. We should never, ever stop learning, because every time we gain new knowledge, new information, we find ourselves happier. Then belonging is when you feel included. If you don't feel included in whatever workplace you are or whatever friendships or associations you have, if you feel like the person who's always on the outside looking in, like when you're window shopping and you just have no money in your pocket, there's no way you can really be happy because you've got a longing deep within you that's just not working. Now we have utensils. And utensils, these are things you need to prepare or cook your meal after you've had your ingredients, made your ingredients ready. And we have purpose, positivity, meaning, and pleasure. So purpose is when you understand and you know what your aim is. And usually we say things like higher purpose when you know you're working and you say, I'm working for the greater good. At the height of the pandemic, we all came out Thursday, 8 o'clock to clap for NHS. And the key workers all smiled because it gave them a sense of purpose that they were doing something meaningful. And that's just an analogy for us to understand purpose. Then positivity is when you're optimistic. If you're always pessimistic and you're like, it's just never gonna happen, there's no way you can be happy. Who's ever happy at something that's never going to happen that they really want? Then we've got meaning. Meaning is when your purpose and your positivity actually marry. You feel that you have a purpose, you're meeting a purpose, you're making a difference. Your life, your job, it's got a meaning. It's got a name. And then pleasure, oh, that's so fleeting emotion of pleasure you get when you had a bite of your chocolate. Ooh, nice. Or when you saw your wellness goodie box, just gave you that pleasure. Pleasure is very fleeting. So we can't define happiness as pleasure. Now we have our nutritional needs or nutritional information. And in that, you've got engagement, you've got resilience, you've got an incorporated team, and you've got kindness. So if your workplace or organization has got the ingredients and the utensils right, that's what they get. An engaged team, a resilient team, an incorporated and kind one because you're kind to one another. This is what leads to a strong, vibrant, happy, and incorporated team. Too many cooks spoil the broth when it comes to happiness. Too many cooks spoil the broth, they say. But when it comes to happiness, stereotyping, bias, and prejudice negatively impact behavior, leading to discrimination, which spoil the meal of happiness. Now let's understand bias. Neuroscientists have proved that our brains erect an us from them distinction almost immediately we find ourselves in any environment. This is natural. It's nothing to be sad or be angry about or live in denial about. We all have it. So while this is a natural cognitive response for self-preservation, it is also the basis for harmful stereotypes, bias, prejudice, behavior, which leads to discrimination. They are formed by our culture, exposure, history, the media, religion, and community. And funny enough, the formation of stereotypes and bias starts as early as age 4. I know because my little boy is 4 and I can already see it. He's got a lot of stereotypes he utters. And so where we then come in is to understand what we're stereotyping. If you see a blue-eyed blonde person, do you think automatically that person is beautiful and good? If you see a dreadlocked woman or man with a guitar, does that also mean that he's got cocaine? This is how you need to understand and check your bias. If you don't check your bias, it leads to prejudice, and prejudice leads to behavior, which leads to discrimination. Now, the effects of bias and discrimination, a quick quote. Freedom is the ability to pause between the stimulus and response. Rollo May. Now, event plus response equals outcome. So an event is where you've let your prejudice, your bias, and your stereotyping to influence your behavior, where you've then created you've made this person feel horrible, or someone's done something that's made you feel horrible. And your response then is, how do you respond to it? Whether it's at that point in time or it's later. And this is, for example, your event could have been a microaggression that came to you, but your response is, how do you deal with it going forward? And the outcome is, what do you want from it? How can you minimize the devastation that that event could have on you or on other people? Now, the thing about bias and discrimination, like I said at the beginning, is that it leads to inner critics. We've got 5 main inner critics. We've got the perfectionist, controller, the conformist, the imposter, and the underminer. Now, these names are pretty self-explanatory, and I'm going to give another example using myself. Before I came to this country, this great country of ours, I was a perfectionist and a controller. I wanted to control everything. It had to go a certain way, and that went hand in hand with being a perfectionist. However, when I moved here and started to experience things like microaggressions, which were racially motivated, and to fight with the Home Office, which is the biggest example of systemic racism, I suddenly developed the conformist inner critic, the imposter syndrome, where I feel I'm not enough. I fear to actually get in touch with people because, oh God, what if they think, who's this person and what's she got to offer me? She's nothing. And then there's the underminer, where it doesn't matter what I do, how well I do it, I still think I didn't do right. I could have done that better. And these are just examples that happen with bias and discrimination. They're things that happen and they affect our mental health. And if they're affecting your mental health, like I say, if the head is sick, the body can't be right. And if this affects the head so much, how can you be happy? So thank you so much for listening and joining us. I've come to the end of my session, and I think Lade is back now. And so we'll go off to her, and then we'll have a quick Q&A, and then go to a breakout room. Lade, over to you, please.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I've been here, actually. I didn't leave. I've been here. It's just that there were too many distractions, and when there are too many distractions and your video is on, it distracts from the main person speaking. So that was why I kind of muted, or I kind of went off screen. Thank you so much for inviting me here. It's quite exciting. I feel, what's the word now? I feel like, okay, what else am I going to say? Listening to Dr. Roxanne speak earlier, listening to Vivian speak earlier, like, what am I going to say? And there is a lot to say, because today we're talking about diversity. A bit of what I was going to mention is what Vivian's talked about. A bit of what I'm going to mention is what Roxanne's talked about, and of course what Valentina's talked about, which is mental health, mainstream mental health. So we're talking about happiness, we're talking about diversity at work, we're talking about the impact of mental health in who we are, the impact of mental illness in who we are. So I'll just quickly introduce myself. I'm Lade Olubemi. I know there was a bit of introduction done yesterday, but I breezed in at a late time. I like to call myself the convener of an organization called Nous. Nous is actually a Greek word for mind. And what that means in essential for me is how our mind is extremely central to who we are. Without a clear mind, you're not able to achieve all the potentials. And I'll just quickly go to the definition of mental health by World Health Organization. I love their definition, and that's one definition I like to use to describe to people about what mental health is. Because oftentimes when I go for presentations, I ask people, how many of us here have mental health? And I like, probably it would just be about 2 or 3 people who would, you know, their hand is up, down, up, down, up, down. So let me ask us here today, how many of us here have mental health? Oh, wow, okay, Paul is good then. Oh, we all have mental health, thank you. Obviously, I'm speaking to the converted, and I feel quite comfortable going to be sharing what I have to share. Of course, we're talking about mental health, but I'm dovetailing in mental health and the workplace. When we talk about mental health, and I'll just go to the definition of mental health by World Health Organization. It says, it is, bear with me one moment, I just need to pick some things up from my screen. The definition of mental health by, hold on, I've got too many presentations open here, too many. So you will bear with me, please. I'm going to share my screen as well. I actually have a PowerPoint that I have done. So
Okay, go for it.
in the last, since the pandemic started, I probably would have done close to 50 presentations, I will tell you. It's extremely busy because obviously mental health is a trending talk now, it's a trending topic, it's a trending word. It's very, very much rightly so. I mean, it's not out of place, it's very much rightly so mental health. And that is because the world has seen in the last few weeks or months an exponential hit on who we are as a race, as humanity. It's never been seen before. We've had various wars, we've had various pandemics before. It's not the first one. We had the Spanish flu years back, but it did not hit the world the way this has. Obviously, because we joined up before. But before you can travel from Africa to England, it just be about 6 weeks on the boat. So it took ages. Now you can travel within 6 hours. Within 6 hours, and I know that when we had, I can't remember the name of that plane that used to travel very fast from London to UK to New York. It used to go in less than how many hours? About 3-4 hours it used to go. They've rested the plane now. But what I'm saying in essence is how the world has very much united. And obviously because the world has very much united through the use of media and of course through the use of technology, a lot of things that would affect us in America would almost simultaneously affect us in UK, in Africa, in Asia, and just name it, all over the world. So the world has been hit really badly. And of course, we know that central to all of this is the fact that something makes the world go round. It is the knowledge, it is the workplace, it is the laboratories, it is the factories. Something makes the world go round. And the world going round obviously means that something pushes all of those places we've talked about. The workplaces we've talked about, something pushes it. There are people there, the factories, the laboratories, the marketplaces, something pushes the world around. And that is why what I'm about to talk about is really, really central. It's something that cannot be ignored. It's something that I know that a lot of organizations are into it and they're making it one of their main agendas. My organization works quite closely as well with some other organizations alongside with the heads together. We've jointly submitted presentations to the Parliament around mental health first aid. I'm trying to make this full screen. Okay, buffering now, buffering. I kind of prefer it when it's full screen so that everybody gets to see it and you don't see the little bits and pieces all around. all the open apps and, you know, you won't see that. Okay, it's buffering. Okay, let me just go ahead. So my organization has worked alongside with some other organizations, making a presentation to the House of Parliament around the need for mental health to be talked out more on a wider scale, just in the homes, not just in the community. All those things I mentioned earlier that makes the world go round. Everything is birthed in the workplace. And if this is not well handled, it can affect a lot of other things. Because we are a microcosm. It's the family that's a microcosm of a bigger community. And that is why it is essential and really, really important for us to talk about mental health. Why talk about mental health in the workplace? And of course, I'm going to link it to what Valentina mentioned. Thank you for sharing your experience. Fantastic. And do you know what I'd just like to say with regards to your experience? I actually work very closely with a local authority, with the CMHT, somewhere southeast of England. And within that CMHT meaning the community mental health team, they actually have a diagnosis that has not been passed on yet called immigration psychosis. There were loads of people who developed mental health issues, psychosis, because of immigration issues. And this is not uncommon. It's a fact that when a person's home, when a person's work, when a person's home work, when it is destabilized, it would affect your mental well-being. No matter how much perfect you think you are, it would affect how you think. It would affect your productivity. I haven't forgotten, I'm still going to go to the definition of World Health Organization around mental health later. My apologies, I'm speaking very fast. I'm just very conscious that I have 10 minutes and I need to push everything through. We all have mental health. So I kind of asked that question earlier. I've asked the question earlier and you all answered. Well, not everybody answers. Some people answer, some people didn't hand up. We all have mental health, just like we all have physical health. And we need to look after this to ensure that we stay well. Evidence out there shows us that people who are experiencing early symptoms of mental ill health, at that stage, they're able to talk about them, particularly in the workplace. But they're only able to talk about them in the workplace if the workplace is a conducive environment. If it's an environment where it's all bottled up, where the manager set them very realistic targets, when the staff is trying to say to the manager, I can't cope with this, the manager is thinking, oh, I need to put on the performance management. When it is an extremely harsh environment, you would not be able to talk about it. And that is why my organization, as well as other organizations, are pushing that we want mental health first aid training to become compulsory for every organization that has more than 10 staff. So every manager, where possible, they must be trained to become mental health first aiders. I'm a mental health first aid instructor. I teach people how to become mental health first aiders. And that in essence means that just like you have safeguarding policies that is compulsory wherever you have children, just like you have, it is compulsory that you must have a physical first aider wherever you're in any environment. You must, where you have more than 10 staff, there must be a physical first aider there. It's part of the requirement for you to be compliant, for you to continue to proceed, to deliver your service. The same thing we're saying, for you to be able to have a workforce that is relevant in the workplace. Mental health first is the training that should be there, and I deliver that training, and we're saying that it can prevent symptoms from developing into illness. So there are symptoms of mental illness, the symptoms that when picked up very quickly, it can actually stop it from progressing. Mental health is a spectrum. You start from the low, medium, high. Where it's in the low, that's when the symptoms show. If a person is in a very conducive environment where they feel comfortable and confident to talk about their issues, we prevent it from getting into the medium and into the high. So we're saying in essence that mental health and in the workplace is a conversation that should be there. And why? We already know that it's estimated that 1 in 4 people experience mental health issues in any given year. And to be honest with you, that was the statistics that was done 6 years ago. I probably would push it up. It's more than 1 in 4. I probably would say it's 2 in 4, especially with the pandemic that a lot of us have gone through, especially with the conditions within the pandemic that a lot of us have been in. It's more than 1 in 4. It was reported that stress levels have gone up high since the pandemic. It also says here that at least 1 in 6 employees is depressed. That's scary. 1 in 6 employees are depressed, anxious, or suffering from stress-related issues at any one time. It is also why we're talking about it, is the cost of mental ill health. It's estimated to be 74 to 99 billion, not million, billion per year. The human cost, you cannot calculate it. This is what you can count. This is the amount that you can count in the workplace. But the human cost, it is that mother at home who is depressed, she's depressed. And the fact that she's not able to help the child go through all the developmental stages. It is the wife who is frustrated. It is the man who is frustrated and becomes and it becomes a perpetrator at home. It is all of the attendant human cost that we cannot calculate in money. The good news here is that when we learn more about mental health and ways to get support, we empower people to thrive and not just to survive. So what we're saying in essence is that organizations need to put things in place. Organizations need to put things in place that are unconscious bias. I am very much aware of two key areas at the moment that is trending within the community. Is the fact that the BAME community, for example, have been 4 times more likely to be hit by COVID. And it's also the Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter movement, and like Vivian, wasn't Vivian, I think it was Dr. Roxanne, like what she said earlier, do you know what? If we keep quiet about this matter, 10 years down the line, we'll be talking about it. Black Lives Matter is not a new movement. We've been talking about it years. It was actually 10 years ago that it came up on the forefront, but then here we are back to it again. So there's a need for us in the workplace because of the underlying pressures that people are under. It is a microaggression like Valentina talked about. It is a fact that the imposter syndrome, all of those things that Valentina mentioned are one of the symptoms and syndromes that a lot of people who have been hit by racism feel. Is the fact that you undermine yourself with presentism. So why do we talk about mental health in the workplace? It's the ability to stop or to spot worsening mental health among team members. And it's around the fact that we need to know how to have effective conversations when we spot those signs. What are the signs? You need to come to one of my trainings for you to know what the signs are. It's a fantastic training, really fantastic training. And what we're saying in essence is that line managers actually do have a role to play, and their role is quite key. It's about engaging employees on a regular basis, making them ideally placed to promote well-being in the workplace. One of the key things I do with my managers at work is that I do a check-in. I call them. They are people first before the target. You can have all your KPIs, all the key performance indicators. Yes, it's fantastic. But the people that drive those things need to be talked, seen, cared for. Of course, we're not saying we're going to become mothers or fathers in the workplace. It's no. But we want organizations to make reasonable adjustments around recognizing the needs of people in the workplaces. And we're talking about whether a person has a diagnosed mental health, whether a person has a diagnosed disability. You don't have to wait for you to see somebody who is on crutches, on wheelchair, for you to know that people can be disabled. I'm the chair of the disability network in my organization where I work at the moment. And one of the key driving campaign I'm putting up now is that disability is sometimes not seen. So when you get into the lift and you see that person going just one floor up, you don't go, that's one floor, why can't she do the stairs? You don't know what she's dealing with. So it's not just about diagnosed mental health. It's not just about diagnosed disability or somebody being labeled as disabled. Much of one of the key things that I'm pushing and I'm talking about is that we want good practices in the workplace. And of course, it's about employers being enlightened as well. You cannot deal with what you don't know. If you don't know what your rights are, you will not be able to ask for them. If you don't know how to ask for them, you would not know how to negotiate with the organization. And that is where I come. I'm a mental health advocate as well. I negotiate and advocate for people because I have a diagnosis. Stigma has fueled this understanding around mental health that have prevented people from seeking support. And that's why we need to break this. And I'm glad. For me, normally, I'm an extremely busy person, absolutely busy person. But when I hear mental health, when I hear the talk about removing the stigma, I jump up. And when Valentina invited me, I'm like, okay, I'm going to come. I'll squeeze time out. I'm going to come. And I've actually stayed in the background, listened to everybody, and thank you all so much. I like to meet comrades. I call them comrades because we're all out there pushing the boundary. Communication is vital, very, very vital. People who have expressed mental ill health are working effectively at all levels of seniority. I like to call myself an expert by experience, and that means that I have been there. So don't say because a person has a physical disability, a mental blip before in their life, that they cannot work. I'm a senior manager where I work. So it should not be, we should not allow that barrier to be we shouldn't allow it to be. So what do we do as comrades? I'd like to call you comrades because we're out there to shift and push the barriers. We need to raise awareness of well-being at work. Don't keep quiet about it. And Vivian, up to you for insisting that your organization must provide a parking space for you. You have to talk out. But as long as we keep quiet about it, they need to not be recognized. The same thing around the Black Lives Matter campaign out there. But as long as we stay there and people are telling you, oh, this is my Black friend, I'm not introducing you as, oh, this is Lade, my friend. For as long as I feel a bit, I have a name that is not an English name, yeah? So there was a time where I felt, oh, should I change my name so that when I put applications in, I actually tried this. I put the same CV, I changed the name, same CV, one with my name, one with another name. Do you know what? I was not shortlisted with my name, with the Ladolugbemi name, but with the English sounding name, I was shortlisted. It is this kind of barriers we need to speak up against. It is the fact that somebody sees you with a what's it called? Somebody sees you with a dreadlock, and they think straight away, oh, this must be a difficult Black woman. Oh, she's one of those difficult Black women. Oh, straight away I can see it from her. But no, we should not keep quiet about it. We need to be asking our employers about healthy food in the canteen, gym membership, resilience training, and also asking for help to promote well-being in the workplace. We cannot keep quiet. There's the unconscious bias around us who have unseen disability. I have a friend, well, not exactly a friend, it's like a godson, who has dyspraxia. He's perfectly okay looking, but he's got dyspraxia. And then when he starts to talk and he's stuttering, you would see the unconscious, they're not vocalizing it, but you can see it in their faces. We need to make sure that the use of language, I like Vivian, sorry, I'm picking on you, but I was jumping when you were speaking. I'm like, woo, woo, woo. You know what is the use of language? It's how we describe people. It's how we call people mutes. No, they're proud to be deaf. They're proud to say they're dumb. So we need to learn what the language is. One of the key things that drives stigma around racism, around disability, is the use of language and how we look at people. And I'm going to end very quickly that, listen, my cliche is that there's ability in every disability, and also the fact that we are all disabled. Because there's one aspect of your life that you do not have ability in. All of us are disabled in one particular area. So I don't know how to do sign language. I am disabled in that area. We are all disabled. And we should all be advocates of disability because all of us are disabled in one area or the other of our life. Thank you very much. I think I worked within my time. Yay! You're muted.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. I think we've had a really amazing day. I don't know about you, but I really look forward to drive because it's like an energy source. I'm able to reboot and refresh myself to go forward. So thank you to our amazing presenters. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and your experiences so generously. And a quick one, I just want us to do a quick practice of feeling our chi. So your chi is your life force. And what you mean by your life force is that essence within you that lets you know you're alive. You know, like when you take deep breaths, controlled breathing, and then you suddenly start to feel your heart go, bim, 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 and you're like, yeah, I'm alive. You've got that. And then, but feeling your chi goes way beyond that. It's feeling your core. And this is when you realize that you're not just human. You are beyond human. You are electromagnetic. So if you're sitting in confined quarters, I'll need you to move. If you don't mind, maybe stand if you want to. Let's get up. So what we do is put your hand in a fist, locate the center, center located. Now give it a massage. That center, open your palm and massage it. Let's do the same thing with the other one. Locate the center, give it a massage. Then we're going to clap both sides together. Got to do it properly to feel it. Then the sides. Repeat. Back. Then you clap it to the front and to the back, to the front, to the back, front, back, front, back, front, back. Come in and rub your palms together. Now draw your palm, feel it. Do you feel that little magnet? A little friction? Do you feel it? Did you feel that friction? A bit like when you have two opposing magnets together and it just goes. It's real quick, but if you've missed it, then you have to do it a bit more aggressively to wake your chi up. And what the essence of that is that sometimes when we're feeling stressed or we feel really anxious or overwhelmed with things going on around us, this is a good way to reconnect with ourselves. How are you feeling? A bit more grounded? If you didn't get it, you're probably feeling a bit curious, like, what didn't I do right? And you're probably going to spend all day practicing it. But if you did feel it, you're feeling much more grounded, a bit in awe that you can actually create that reaction between both palms. If you need me to send you that thing again, I'll send it down and you can practice it again. So the next thing we're going to do to keep us grounded is I need you to close your eyes and count to 5. With each counting, take a deep breath and let it out. Now open your eyes. Tell me the first 3 things you can see. Observe 3 things. Now listen and identify 3 unique sounds. Quietly. Now take a deep breath and identify 1 smell. You're fine. How do you feel? Relaxed? A bit more here with me. Thank you. So that's another exercise you can do. You can do it anywhere, really. And that's something you can do to just bring yourself back to the moment, back to the present. And that's it's a simple mindfulness meditation, but it really does calm you and brings you back into focus so you're able to reprioritize. So if we're still game, I'm sorry, we've run 7 minutes above time. I could pop us 2 minutes into a breakout room so you can have a quick chat with each other, get to know each other a bit more, find out how the other person has experienced this experience. So thumbs up if you're fine with that, and thumbs down if you want us to just go home. Great.
Let me just make sure. Is it okay, Valentina?
It is Q&A time. So yeah.
Yeah, excellent. So, okay. So how do you strike a balance between inspiring people, showing how amazing someone is, and sharing the story of someone who has a disability, but wording it in such a way that isn't offensive, like those posters you described? Also, what are some of the language alternatives you would suggest to some of those words?
Yeah, I just find in general that obviously I'm really keen in my job to make sure, because it can be a minefield. You know, all I want to do is make sure I'm using the correct language and terminology, but I know that it's something that changes quite continually. So I just wondered, when you talked about sort of like impaired or that kind of thing, like what are some of the main words that you typically use?
So yeah, so I was focusing on to highlight a deficit model, which for me is really unhelpful, isn't it? Well, for me it is.
Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
And for a lot of people as well, they would feel, oh yeah, I don't like that word. So what I do personally is I listen to what individuals
and ask
what language do you use. So if for example you were going to interview a deaf person about their business and about their success in their business, then you might find out from them what sort of language have you used. Do you use about your own deafness? Do you use about deafness for the community, for the non-deaf community, etc., etc.? So I'm a real believer in observing and following and taking the lead. If I was going to write a policy, I would be meeting with the individuals. If you were going to interview, like, let's just for argument's sake, that I'm a doctor, a psychotherapist, what I do for a living. You also may know, if you've been following me on Facebook, that since lockdown, there's been a massive impact on my business, and I've started painting, So I start painting, and then I get someone commissions me to do a job, and then I'm doing a hoodie for a former world champion. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Great. It's a story about a mental health doctor who has a disability but it's not about inspiration porn. It's about, I was protecting my own mental health by taking up creativity, by making a film and doing some paintings. So, it's not about that porn, that inspirational.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of like, it's such a fine line, because you want to sort of get stories out there. Like if you've got somebody young who has a disability, who sort of, you need role models, people to look up to. It's about sort of striking the balance, I guess, like reflecting that in a story, but not that being the lead angle. I guess it's hard, isn't it?
You don't want to be exceptional just because you're disabled.
Yeah.
That's the message for me.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Interesting point. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Viv. Does anyone else have a question? We good? So if we're all good, we're just going to say thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to leave you with music. So don't log off if you don't want to, or if you don't have to, and you can listen to Femi Leye and Clay Monet's Titillate Ourselves. But I hope you've had some great takeaways today. Thank you for joining us once more. Thanks for giving us your attention. And we hope you've gotten a lot of takeaways on the psychology, the science, and the happiness factor. And going forward, we will be able to not just protect our own mental health and well-being, but also look out for our associates or neighbor or friends' mental health and well-being, so that we do not allow our own unconscious bias influence our behavior, which then has a disastrous outcome, like we've been saying so often. So thank you. If you do have anything you want to say, please say. And if you really enjoyed the session, please give us a thumbs up on social media, as we're trying to grow. Thank you once more.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Really good to see you.
Really good to see you, Finola. Thank you. All right, here we have Femi Leye.
Dance with me from to dusk. Dance with me from tonight. Dance with me till the break of dawn. Dance with me till the end of time. Oh baby, dance. We can swing them left and right. Oh baby, dance. Let your body feel alright. Let the rhythm be your soul. and baby girl, why not show? I am in the smoke. I hold you tight till the morning. Let it until the hour. We'll be dancing forever. Dance with me till the dusk. Dance with me from tonight. Dance with me till the break of dawn. Dance with me till the end of time. Anything you want, baby, I'll give it to you. Call my name, Femi, my love, I'm ready for you. Baby, you have control. Take around my heart and soul. Moro, wale, finer than diamonds and gold. Baby, dance. Oh, dance. Mucho llora, leave me, oh. Come on, dance. Yeah. Dance with me from dusk to dusk. Sweet.
Ali, talk later. Hello. Sorry, I think my internet's messed me up a bit. The heat got into my laptop.
It must be a doomsday today.
Hello, I'm Clayman Ayers and we've done a cool place called ViDrate. I used to.
Sorry, I'm just trying to check my internet connection, really.
Sweep the streets, I used to roll her eyes.